Aloha! Welcome to the Live Ukulele Podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa, and you are listening to another James Hill episode. James Hill is the first person, I believe, who's been on the podcast twice, except for my friend Ryan Higgins, who has come on a couple times to talk story. James is in the middle of getting started with a project called Uke Heads. It's a little bit revolutionary, kind of weird, a little different, because it's based around a set of art pieces that he has created. And by purchasing one of these Uke Head art pieces, it's like a ticket for you to participate in playing on the album and getting to attend kind of recital Zoom sessions where James teaches the part for the song that he's recording. You get to record at home your part, and then you submit your part and you get included on the album. It also has a bit of a blockchain spin because the Uke Head art pieces are available as NFTs. And because I don't know much about the blockchain or NFTs, I invited my friend Dagan Bernstein to jump on the call with us and to lend his expertise, because he's a little bit more nerdy about the blockchain stuff, and provide his insight from that place of expertise, which is not my own. That is not my jam. The Live Ukulele Podcast is listener supported. So if you like what you hear, certainly subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. And also consider checking out liveukulele.com and all of the resources available there. There are many free resources, also some premium ebooks and video courses where I have collected the best of my knowledge all in one place and put it together for presentation to you, so you can learn a great concept in a high quality package. Without further ado, let's get into the interview and hear what James has to share about Uke Heads. Well, welcome guys. Thanks for joining me here. Thank you to Dagan for lending his blockchain brain, as we'll call it, and of course, James Hill. Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about the project, James, because I know you reached out, you wanted to share about Uke Heads, and it's kind of weird. So, yeah, clue us in the short version that you've been covering in your live streams.
Okay, well, I like your summary that it's kind of weird. That's a really nice sort of very succinct way to sum the whole thing up. It is kind of weird, and I'm okay with that. It's the idea that maybe an album could become a community. I think that's the essence of it. I wrote a bunch of songs, and I did a bunch of artwork, and I'm selling the artwork. And when you buy the artwork, one of the pieces at least, it gives you a ticket to record with me on the songs. Like, it's sort of that simple. Although that already sounds like sort of an expanded idea of what an album traditionally is. And it really has so far worked. I mean, we've been able to turn this album into more than just an album release. This is like the slow album movement, because like instead of me toiling away for months or sometimes years and then just dropping an album into the void and hoping that a few people might sort of catch it on its way down, we're creating this album together over the course of about a year, doing one song a month, and by the end of that process, the people who have played on the songs are just, you know, they're part of the music. They really are, like literally part of the music. Their sound is on the album. Their names are in the credits forever and ever. To me, that's just an exciting extension of what we traditionally think of as an album, and that's what the Uke Heads experiment is all about.
And so, can you speak a little bit to the the newness of the NFT concept and kind of the direction you're going by also providing the artwork as something that exists on the blockchain?
I can definitely talk about that. It's not my favorite part of the project, but I can definitely talk about it. It's certainly not the reason that I got into this project. Although I am very curious about blockchain, much more so than cryptocurrency. And in fact, I didn't become interested in either one until I realized that cryptocurrency and blockchain were two different things. That cryptocurrency is just one application of this technology called blockchain, which is really a giant computer that's just spaced out all over the world that everybody can access and do cool things with. And making it into digital money was only the first and most obvious application of this giant distributed computer. And I didn't understand that crypto and blockchain were two different things. And once I got wind of that, I was like, whoa, that means it's not just about money? Cool. What else is it about? And it turns out it's about a lot of things. It's about artwork, and it's about community, and more it's becoming about music. And so all of that is part of the exploration here. I guess I should step back and say the individual pieces of art, each of which is unique, each of which is a one-of-one edition, and each of which serves as a person's ticket to participate. Each one of those is, in fact, an NFT, a non-fungible token on a blockchain. But what we've done, and what sort of Dagan coined the phrase Web 2.5 to speak of this world between the internet that we know and the internet that we're moving into. A lot of people talk about Web 2 being the internet that we know, and Web 3 being the internet that we are discovering through this blockchain technology. Well, there's quite a leap between those two worlds, and most of my fans are older than I am, and they are fearless, and they have followed me down this path. But I wanted to make it as easy for them as possible. So we don't require them to buy the NFT proper. We will hold the NFT for them. We will hold that token for them. They get all the benefits of having that ticket, but we keep it safe and warm for them until such time as maybe they actually want to get a digital wallet, which you need to hold it. And we can just, maybe 2 years from now, if they get one of these wallets and they say, hey, I'm ready for my NFT now, we transfer it to them for free. But in the meantime, we hold on to them until people ask. And more importantly, we get to the good stuff, which is the community building and the musical aspects. And we don't get hung up on the technology. And I think that very frictionless, practical approach to things, which we might call Web 2.5, has been a really sweet spot. And it's helped to get the project off the ground without too much agony, and we're just getting right to the good stuff.
Nice. Well, you talk about how your intent is just to have the community and to get people recording on these songs with you. Have you started any of that process, or what is the timeline looking like?
Yeah, we jumped into it pretty quick. We had, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks where people were just getting used to how we were going to communicate and getting used to our online sort of workspace where we connect. And then we had our first rehearsal end of last month, and we're sort of laying the pavement as we go here, right? So we're trying to create a cycle that makes sense and that people can that sort of people can get into the rhythm of. And so this monthly cycle of having a rehearsal, them working on their parts, them sending in their recordings, us having a little review of that mix, and then going on to the next song, and the process repeats again. We're just into the end of our first cycle. And I've been really impressed by how fearless they are in terms of the recording technology. A lot of people haven't recorded themselves at home before, and also the just the fact that they have to then submit this, and their peers can hear them, and they've just been very game for whatever, and they've been there for the music. I think they really love the songs, and we've taken a poll. We're doing this as democratically as possible. So, like, which song do you want to start with out of these 10 or 11 songs? We've all decided together the order that we're going to record in. So we're starting with the ones that people are most enthusiastic about, and so far it's going really well. I mean, we haven't had our first mixing session yet, so even though I've had a peek already, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work out just fine. But, you might want to ask me after we have that first mixing session, and I've got, 75 layers of tracks that I'm trying to sort of amalgamate and make sound like a cohesive whole. Maybe ask me after that, but I doubt I would have a different answer. I think it's coming together nicely, and I feel that people are having a good time.
Nice. So are you mixing it yourself, or are you hiring that out to somebody?
No, I'm doing it myself. It's too good to pass up. Like, this is a good challenge. I'm up for it. It's great. I love mixing. Mixing is one of my little joys. I don't like mastering, and I don't like tracking, but I do like mixing.
So what is your approach for getting the parts to sit? Because you're going to have so many tracks. Are people playing different parts? Are they all playing the same thing?
They're, in this case, they are playing, there's an instrumental part and there's a vocal part. And one of the challenges, I mean, Dagan, you can speak to this as well, being somebody who's on the other side of that rehearsal. I have my intentions going into it, but I'm curious to know how you sort of perceive this. So my intentions were to not have everybody playing all the time. If potentially there could be over 1,000 people on this project. Not yet. Maybe by the end we'll it's like Forrest Gump running across the country. When he starts out, there's like 3 people. By the end, he's got like this whole mass of people with it. It could end up like that, and we could end up having like a lot of people involved. I knew the parts had to be really simple, and I knew I couldn't have them playing all the time or singing all the time. They had to approach it more like a orchestra. Sometimes the trumpet player just sits there and counts on his fingers until it's time to play that one note. It's even worse if you're the cymbal player, or the bass drum player. You're sitting there counting bars. That's not something that we are accustomed to as ukulele players. Like, when you go to a kanikapila, you start playing and you play that whole song until the very last chord, and that's the fun of it, And so there was a little cultural sort of like ukulele culture. We're not into that yet. We're not into that sort of orchestral approach where I'm going to sit and wait, and when it's time, I'm going to play my part, and I'm going to do a great job. I think we got over that pretty quickly, but I'm interested to hear what Dagan thought about the rehearsal and how that was received.
Well, I can't jump in on that. I have not had the time to engage with one of the rehearsals yet, so I can't offer much to that.
Oh, okay. Sorry to put you on the spot. No, I mean, from the feedback that I'm getting, people have adjusted like fine to that. It was just a matter of them understanding that they weren't going to be strumming the whole time. Once we could get over that little hump, then I think the whole thing just started to roll. And I had to be really purposeful in terms of how I created the parts. I was really tempted to have them play more. And I just knew as I was writing those parts, every little dot on the page, every little tab that I was writing, I was like, is this going to work with 1,000 people? You don't have to think about that usually. But I'd had the experience of arranging for ukulele orchestra back when I was doing my ukulele hot springs sort of retreats before the pandemic. And those were very orchestral, and all of that experience really helped me to write parts that I think are realistic and musically satisfying for people. That's a thin edge to walk on, but I'm hoping to maintain that balance throughout.
How does that contrast with your experience, Dagan? Because you worked with the students at HPA, working to have, was it a rehearsal or a festival you guys called it? But you were teaching parts, right?
Yes. I mean, I think the difference is the music was, orchestrated and written with specific parts, and students were taught in different sections and given roles. And me as the musical director was ideating how to construct all the different parts and the overall music so they would fit together. Whereas this approach, like James was saying, it allows for individual musical freedom, yet the trust is being placed within that individual freedom that they're going to find a place that fits in with the broader, the broader music. So there's like another musical intelligence that is involved in that versus just playing a written part, to actually come up with something original that fits in with a song that already exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was also a misconception at first, where people were looking at this project going, cool, like he's just going to let me jam, on the track. That's going to be cool. Like, and I think a few people were thinking, oh, okay, when it's my turn, what am I going to do? Like, do I have to write my part? Do I get a solo? How long is my solo? Am I going to hear my voice? Am I going to be able to point out to my kids, hey, that's me in those 4 measures? And I just had to sort of power through that and get people in the door and have them realize that this was going to be more of an orchestral approach. And if you've ever sung in a choir before, you know that if your voice can be heard in the final recording, then something hasn't worked out quite right. The point is not for you to hear your individual voice, but for you to blend with everyone else. And I think people are coming around to that very quickly. Many people understood that from the beginning, and those who had a different impression are getting hip to it real quick. And that's why the mixing review session that we're going to do is so important, because people are going to be in there in the mix. They may not hear every single note that they played individually, but they are in there. And it's important for them to see on the screen, to see the session, to see their waveform getting flown into the mix, and to hear them soloed with some of their peers, and to hear how it blends together, so that they really understand that they are in there and they do, and their contribution is for real. And that mixing session is going to be super important, I think, for people to believe in the final product, because not everybody has that kind of X-ray vision or X-ray hearing. They can't sort of reach inside a mix with their ears and hear individual parts. I know my mom is like that. She doesn't hear individual parts. I remember driving with her one day, and we were listening to Lenny Kravitz on the stereo, and I said, "Mom, listen to that bass drum part. Isn't that wicked?" And she was like, "Oh, honey, I have no idea what you're talking about." It's like, and I was like, "Well, there it is. Boom, 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 boom." And she's like, "Nope, don't hear it." I'm like, "It's the bass drum. Like the windows are shaking in rhythm." "No, I just listened to the whole thing as one whole, it's like I'm looking at a painting and that's it. That's all I see." I'm like, okay, that's probably actually much more common than the ability to sort of reach inside a mix and hear the individual parts. And that was a real eye-opener for me. My mom actually doesn't sound like that, but that was a really bad impression of her.
Well, my mom says the same sorts of things, so
you can relate. Yeah.
Too much. Well, Dagan and I were talking, and I think he had some questions about the vision and the future and kind of how you got set on this path in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe I kind of wanted to start from a place that maybe people are familiar with, like crowdfunding and crowdsourcing approach, because I think this kind of fits somewhere in that box, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're inviting the community to participate in the project. The key difference here, obviously, with a typical crowdfunding, I might, I donate $60 to James Hill's ukulele project, and I get a tote bag or a hat or a CD or whatever. But you're actually inviting people into the project, right? So I guess my first question is, why didn't you just add that layer to an existing crowdfunding approach? Like, add that as one of the tiers to the crowdfunding, like play on the album with James Hill if you donate $100 through PayPal. Like, what kind of first got you to add this other layer to it, this kind of Web 2.5 that we've dubbed it?
It's a really good question. I struggled with that initially as well, wondering what the difference was between Uke Heads and a Kickstarter. It's like, what really is fundamentally the difference? And I think there are a couple of things that come to mind, but the most practical and sort of direct answer is longevity. I felt that this process was something that I wanted to have continue beyond the scope of just one album. And I think the traditional Kickstarter is like, or crowdfunding, whatever campaign, is limited to the scope of one project. You donate to that album, or you donate to that single or that video, and when it's over, it's over. You have your tote bag. I cut off a lock of my hair and I send it to you in the mail, and you have that for that. But that's the end of it, right? And I really wanted to see if we could grow a community of people who would continue to bring value to one another and enjoy experiences, beyond the scope of a single project. So this is the beginning of something, and because they continue to hold the token after the album is released, I love the idea of, like, a year after the album comes out, we get the band back together, to do a single. Like, I've got a bunch of singles that have never found homes on albums or anything, and probably never will. Like, there's this one Earth Day single in particular that I really want to do. It would be perfect for Uke Heads. I'd love to say, hey, everybody, we're getting the band back together. Let's go. Here's the time and the place, and let's do this thing. And they continue to get value from holding that token long after the album is out. Not to mention other things like if you hold the token, if you're a Uke Head owner, you might get discounts on online courses. If there's an in-person event, you could get VIP. All those kind of more conventional utility items that we talk about in the Web3 zone. Those just bring longevity to the project that you just simply don't get with a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads me to my second question. I mean, most projects, for me, being in the Web3 space, being in the NFT space, most projects lead with those things you mentioned. They lead with the token utility, and that's kind of the pull for people in the NFT space. You almost have to sell it to people already in this ecosystem. But you're obviously dealing with a much different audience. My impression is that by using this approach, it's actually helped the community focus on some of the essential elements required to make this project happen that you outlined, like how to set up a recording at home, how to submit files online, how to play with other people, like really tangible, real, from an ukulele player perspective, like really valuable things that we probably need as a community to move like ukulele playing forward. Was that intended? Is that kind of just a byproduct of it? And if it was intended, like, how did you see that through the kind of NFT noise, for lack of a better word?
That is a good word for it, the NFT noise, because there's a whole lot of it out there. And I'm the first to admit that that NFTs are, radically overhyped, at least before the current crash, and radically misunderstood. And that puts a lot of people off. I guess for some of those reasons, I felt like the answer to that, to cut through the noise, was to focus on the music. It's that simple. Like, there's noise and there's music. Let's focus on the music. Because for me, like, I'm actually a very simple person. Like, whenever I have a problem in life, the thing I immediately think of, my little mantra, that has been with me my whole life is, what does that have to do with music? Like, that's literally a large part of my brain is devoted to that one phrase. What does this have to do with music? You know, when I see anything come across my desk, what does this have to do with music? And when I see NFTs, cool, but what does that have to do with music? If it didn't have if I couldn't bring the music to the forefront of the project, I wasn't going to be interested. And so I had to think of a way to put music at the forefront. So even though I think what Kings of Leon did was innovative and cool, being early adopters of, you know, releasing their album as an NFT, the kind of utility that they were talking about, like, oh, you buy this NFT, you get front row seats for life or something, or you buy this NFT, you get a backstage pass. To me, just personally, that didn't cut the mustard, because it wasn't about the music. It was about some extra musical bit of fun that's great, and I'm not begrudging anybody for offering that kind of utility. But for me, if it's not directly about the music, then I'm much less enthusiastic. And you know, the kind of work that goes into a project like this, you have to be so enthusiastic. And so that was, for me, the way to cut through the noise. And I just want to mention something that maybe preempting one of your questions, but there's a lot of, as you well know, there's a lot of speculation in the NFT world. So like, I'm going to buy something because I think I'm going to be able to flip it, because I think I'm going to be able to make a profit. We, for whatever reason, haven't experienced a lot of that with Uke Heads, which I'm really happy about. Maybe it's just the smallness of it. Maybe it's the fact that it's off the NFT radar. Maybe it's the fact that everything we're doing is like an ukulele-sized version of what is happening in the wider NFT world. It's quaint, it's small, it's human-sized. And we haven't had people, as far as I can tell, coming in, buying up a bunch, hoping that they can flip them the next day on OpenSea. You know, we just haven't courted a culture of speculation. What I like to say is that ROI equals FUN. The return on investment is the fun that you have being part of the project. It was one of the questions that came up in our early conversations with people leading up to the launch. People were saying, well, you know, how can I make money with this? And I outlined a few ways that maybe, no promises, but maybe in the future you could sell your token. I mean, maybe if this album does well and it gets a good review and it maybe gets an award, hey, maybe you could sell your Uke Head for a couple more bucks than you bought it for. Wouldn't that be fun? But the main thing that you have to accept is that the ROI is FUN. The return on investment is the fun of participation. If you're hip to that, you're going to love this project. And I think we've appealed to people who really get that.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say my observation in this space has been that the technology and the, it's not complexity, but sometimes the roadblocks around just the NFT stuff can get in the way of that fun. I mean, if you had people like, I can't get my wallet to work, or I can't get crypto, or I don't understand, or my bank doesn't accept it, or my cousin told me that I'm evil if I buy crypto, then people might balk. And then they're not accessing that fun, which is what FUN spells for those who might be phonetically incompetent at home. But I love that part of it, that it's like, it's saying, hey, don't worry about any of that stuff. If you want to, you can. I mean, if you're a NFT nerd like me and I want to see it in my wallet and transfer it from Polygon onto blah, 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 and whatever, I can. But if you just want to do it for the fun, be involved, and have a super cool JPEG of a awesome looking ukulele head thing, then you can do that too. And like you said, it allows the community to just focus on the music, which is pretty awesome.
That's job number one. And I think so far, I mean, we're only one song into it, so, you know, don't quote me, but I think so far that's exactly what's happening. And, you know, I couldn't be happier with the warmth and the genuine, sincere caring that I see in the workspace every day. People coming to the aid of their fellow Uke Heads when they can't figure out a part, or they can't figure out how to plug their mic in, or they can't figure out where to upload their files. I've really kind of stayed a bit hands off to see if the community would fill that gap, and they really have. There's leaders in that workspace who have stepped up, who don't who have a certain skill set that others people might not have, and they're willing to share. In fact, I think they think it's fun to become leaders in the community, and that's what it takes. I think it takes me to create the conditions for that community to thrive. That's my role, not to babysit every little thing that happens and to micromanage and oversee everybody's everything, but to create the conditions and step back and see if the fire takes. It's like, you can't sit there. I went camping last weekend and we had wet firewood, and it was excruciating. I was on my knees blowing on that fire for like 45 minutes before I finally I gave up. And we had smoked marshmallows, which was, a consolation prize. It wasn't great. But like, that's when you know that your community is just not working. You're sitting there blowing on it and winding yourself, and you can't stand back from it and just watch the sparks fly and the fire kind of take on its own. And I think that's where we're at with Uke Heads right now. I'm standing back from it going, this thing is actually under its own power. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's what this space needs. Speaking more of like the NFT kind of blockchain space is, there's all these projects and all this hype, and, as an observer, I knew it was going to kind of crash eventually. It just had to. And I think it's more healthy for the overall, blockchain ecosystem, because like you said, the community is what is most valuable. I think that's who we are as humans, and we want to connect and share. And this technology can facilitate that, but that got really lost in a lot of kind of the hype. And, I'm involved in an educator NFT project. And similarly, like you described, we're seeing the community really, help each other and support each other. And I think you had the foresight to set up the conditions to do that, like you said. So my last question, can I ask one more question, Brad? Or
go for it.
Okay, because my last question is, like, if you were to look at your overall kind of progression using technology as an ukulele player, teacher, and community person, because that's one thing I've loved about knowing you for however many years I've known you and observed you, is like, from how you set up your lessons and your ebooks, like, you've really always been kind of there with things over the last maybe 20 years. I think that would be fair to say. Yeah. So like, where did that kind of foresight come from? Because most people just would have rushed in and been like, oh, gold rush time, NFTs, baby, ukulele, let's do it. Let's sell them. And let's, but like, putting the money aside, though, from a community and technology standpoint, I think you were really smart and intentional about how you did this. So as you kind of look at Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, like, how did you kind of put the pieces together in your head to say, hey, this is the best path forward for this next project and this next iteration?
That's a really interesting question, pretty broad question. But I guess there's a few pieces to that. First of all, I've always been curious about technology. I won't say I've been like a whiz at it. I've always been able to hang in there and do at least as much as I have to get my vision on paper or in whatever on the screen. I have a thing in my head. I have a compulsion to get that thing out. I find it's very uncomfortable to have a thing in your head that you want to say or play or do and not be able to get it out. I find that extremely uncomfortable, and I'm extremely motivated to get the thing out of my head. Even my wife knows that, like, if I'm getting cranky, it's probably because I have a thing in my head. and she will say, you need to go to the studio, or I'll say, can I go to the studio now? I know we're making dinner, but I need to get this thing out. It's like something stuck between your teeth, and so like I'm extremely motivated by that feeling really of discomfort. and so if somebody's like, well, hey, you could get that thing out of your head if you just learn like a little bit of HTML, and I'm like, what's HTML? And they're like, oh, well, it's this language that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, give me the book. Like, how hard can it be? Right. And I'm like, this is Web 1 days. This is 2002 kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll do that. It's only going to take me a few days to sort of get the basics of what I'm envisioning onto the screen. And so, although I haven't ever been like an absolute whiz at the technology, I've always been curious about the technology, and I've always been extremely driven by my need to get that stuff out of my head. And I think that, combined with what the ukulele has taught me in terms of people, like the ukulele is people. The ukulele third wave came about because people found each other. Like it's that simple. People found each other. They thought they were alone, and they were the only weird person in their life who loved the ukulele. And then in 2003 and 2004, they went online to these bulletin boards and forums, and they found each other. It's just the story of people reconnecting. That's the story of the third wave. And when they started to connect publicly and in person, I learned so much about what it means to be in community with people who are making music and trying to have a musical experience that is meaningful. Beyond, like, the ukulele has always been extremely participatory. People come to the show with their ukes. Like, it's one of the hallmarks of the ukulele world. That doesn't happen when you go to the symphony. Like, people don't bring their oboe to the symphony. Like, it just doesn't seem to be that way. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, or that it couldn't be, or maybe one day it won't be, but like, that just doesn't happen. It's not baked into the culture of that music. But it is with the ukulele, and it always has been, at least as long as I've ever been around the scene. And growing up, like literally growing up from a 20-year-old, and growing up in that participatory space where it's kind of an extension of the spirit of Kanakapila, sort of like as it sort of washes over the world through this high-tech sort of medium of the internet. It's almost like Kanakapila, or at least that feeling, or the attempt to capture that feeling, kind of drove this whole movement. Whether people knew what a Kanakapila was or not, they were reconnecting with that feeling. And so I guess it's really those two things. It's like no fear for technology in as far as it can serve my vision for whatever it might be, and also a deep, deep respect for the power of people finding one another, which I guess is what we call community. If you can continuously slap those two things together, maybe slap is the wrong word, if you can continuously bring those two things together over the course of multiple generations of technology, then you can continue to commune with the spirit of that, with the spirit of this movement that is like the third wave of ukulele. I really think that's maybe oversimplifying it, but really it's those two aspects that have always been the two guiding lights. And if I can keep merging those two things, then I can keep moving forward.
Awesome. That's super, super cool.
That's a kind of an amazing question. I've never even tried to articulate that before. Thank you.
Well, you keep talking about community and bringing people together and what you've seen in your communication station for Uke Heads. What kind of lessons do you hope that people will take away from the experience of playing on the album and learning to record and learning to play their part? Is there, because you're teaching the notes and what harmonies you'd like people to be playing, but what kind of like musical skills are you hoping that folks will take away?
That's a really good question. I mean, you guys know, I mean, all three of us are deeply involved with ukulele and education and artistry and that sort of trinity of things. Like we write songs, we love the ukulele, and we teach people. So it's like those three things, and we're constantly bouncing around that triangle. I knew that this project, Uke Heads, would be a convergence of artistry, as in me writing my songs and trying to express something personal and universal. And it would at the same time have to merge with all my experience as an educator. That, I didn't think too deeply about that. I knew that it was going to happen, that those worlds were going to collide in a way that they'd never collided before. I think back to like my early days of being on the ukulele festival circuit with Victoria Vox. I think I respect her so much because she has always brought her own material to the table. Like, she is a songwriter through and through, and that's her happy place. That's her skill set. She's a wonderful singer and a great songwriter. And what impressed me so much about her now and in the early days is when she would teach workshops, the rest of us would be sitting there teaching, C, F, and G7, or in my case, C7 and F add 9. And we'd be teaching the triple strum and the double strum and the single strum and the quadruple strum and and a little bit of jazz and a little bit of claw hammer and a little bit of thing. And Victoria would be teaching her songs. And I was like, that is awesome. I didn't know you could do that, and she really opened my eyes to, like, if you're an artist who creates original material, you can still be a teacher within the realm of that material. That's so cool. So that was because of seeing her do that. That was kind of ringing in the back of my mind. And I thought, this is going to be my moment to do that. I've never done that before. I've never gone to a town and done a concert and workshop combo and taught people the songs that they're going to hear that night. It's always been kind of separate. Then never the two shall meet, Well, with Uke Heads, I knew those two things were going to coalesce, and they really have. I don't know to what extent I would say that Uke Heads is like a methodology. It's really not. I mean, it's like, I hope you can play this. I've written it so that it's not too hard and not too easy, but you're going to have to either rise to the occasion if this is beyond your level, or sort of find a sort of a elegant simplicity in this part that might be below your level. Because normally what I would do with all my education experience, I would create parts that were differentiated so that there were easy parts and there were medium parts and there were hard parts. But in this case, I didn't feel that I could go that deep into the orchestral sort of arrangements. I had to have one part for playing and one part for singing. And so it's a compromise on sort of my education ideals, but it had to happen that way in order for it to mesh with my sort of artistic, ideals, I guess. So, I guess my hope is that people try things that they never tried before, and that leads them down pathways that they never would have thought to explore. And, I do know a few websites that have some great courses that they can follow up with, if they really catch the bug and want to learn, right hand technique or left hand technique with Brad Bordessa, or ukulele jazz with James Hill, or if they get the bug, I can steer them places. I'm really just hoping that this project will help them try new things. That's a long way to say try new things, but I just wanted to give a bit of the background and sort of the thinking behind it.
That's great. Anything else you want to share before we get off of here?
Probably. Yeah, I was talking with Bernadette the other day. Bernadette teaches music from YouTube, and we were having a good discussion about community, because, like you said, in when the last thing you said was, you were talking a lot about community, and that concept is tricky. You hear that word a lot. You hear that word a lot in many, many different contexts. and it doesn't always mean the same thing. One word cannot be used that much and always mean the same thing. And yet we sort of throw it around like it's, like everybody knows what we're talking about. When in fact, I'm not sure we do, pretty much ever. And so that's something I've been sort of daydreaming about as I'm doing the dishes or like feeding the chickens. Did I mention we got chickens?
Awesome.
Yeah. As I'm doing that stuff, I'm daydreaming about, what exactly is this? What exactly is this thing we call community? Dagan, in the Web3 world, the word community gets thrown around a lot. Usually, I shouldn't say usually, but often to mean people grinding on a Discord server all day, trying to get on an allow list for a new drop so that they can flip the token the next day. Like, to what extent is that real, what I would call like genuine, sincere, caring community? Or is it? Maybe it's just not the kind of community that I would love to be part of. Like, if the underlying sort of subtext of the community is, hey guys and gals, but mostly guys, let's all work together to make me rich. I'm not sure that that doesn't pass the bar for me. And maybe that's kind of I'm going out on a limb to say what I really think here, but when I go to the supermarket, I'm in the supermarket and I'm with a bunch of other people. They're all shopping too. We're all there for the same reason. There's a common purpose. We all want food. And yet when I look around, I don't feel particularly connected to those people. Like, I wouldn't call it a community, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, like, why not? Why don't I feel that way about the person behind me in the checkout line? I don't know. When I go to a football game, I've been to a football game once, like years ago. I'm really drawing on my memory here. But when I go to a football game and I'm standing next to the person who's cheering for my team, I do feel connected to them. I feel like, hey, this is my community. These are my people. Woo! Why? I mean, okay, let me state the obvious. Maybe the difference is beer. I don't know. But I'm not sure. And this is an open question. I have not daydreamed on this for long enough to have a good answer for why some things look like community and don't feel like community, and some things feel like community but don't look like community. I don't know. I'm putting it out there. I'm saying, let's just keep experimenting. I think Uke Heads is just one drop in the bucket of exploring what this word that we all use so often actually means. I think we've done a thing where it feels good when we're there together making music. Maybe music is like beer. It just makes it feel right. Not everything does that. But maybe music is one of those sort of magic ingredients that brings people together in the best possible way. I'd like to think so. And I guess in the end, that's really what Uke Heads is about.
Awesome. Well, all the best of successes with the project. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find out more about what you're doing?
Well, you can always go to ukeheads.com and you can find the Uke Head that speaks to you. Just go to the shop and you'll see the ones that are still available. And it's a bit like going to the pet rescue. You're just like looking through and you're like, oh, you're so cute, I have to take you home. I think you'll find one that just resonates with you, and that becomes your identity, and you join the community, and we get on with it. Join the band, be part of the fun. The return on your investment will be a whole lot of musical fun that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Nice. And thanks to Dagan for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And I know I haven't been able to jump in on the rehearsals yet, but now that I finally got back from my travels, I'm looking forward to jumping in and adding some ukulele to the orchestra, to the band.
Yeah, that's great. No, there's a lot more music coming, so awesome. It's great to have you there and part of the band. So thanks, Dagan.
For sure.
Thanks again to James Hill for sharing about the new Uke Heads project, and to Dagan Bernstein for lending some thoughts on the blockchain side of things and the progression of technology as it relates to creating community and facilitating projects like this. You can find out more about Uke Heads at ukeheads.com or any of James Hill's corresponding ukulele websites. Dagan can be found on daganmusic.com, Dagan. You can also find some thoughts about his most recent project, which I helped him produce, some of the backstory of that. And there's also a blog somewhere where he talks about different ukulele kinds of things and Hawaiian music musings that's very interesting to read up on. The Live Ukulele podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. Please subscribe if you like what you hear so you don't miss a single episode. Got some cool interviews lined up for you folks in the next couple of episodes. Gonna talk to Aaron Nakamura from Ukulele Underground, and also might be talking to my friend Joey Bradley from up in Kohala, who's an amazing singer, songwriter, ukulele player, and ukulele kind of enthusiast collector. He's going to come over next week and hang out and talk story with me. Not sure if we're going to do a podcast, but it kind of sounded like that might be a possibility. So keep an eye out for that as well. Should be good fun. And thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next episode. Till then, aloha.